What's up, metal and heavy music fans? These are my favorite metal albums of 2022 so far. Right off the top, we have Septicflesh with Modern Primitive. So I waited a long time for this album, and thankfully, it did not disappoint. I would even go so far as to say this album contains some of the band's best orchestration to date, with the coming storms, raging whirlwind of woodwinds and screeching bows, or a desert throne going full-on Lawrence of Arabia soundtrack. Speaking of which, I'm loving the regional influences in addition to the usual bombastic explosions of brass and haunting strings, and then of course all of this contrasted with the big, lumbering riffs and inhumanly deep growls of tracks like Hierophant and Neuromancer. After finding myself a bit disappointed by Codex Omega, this was well worth the 5-year wait and a great comeback. It's 39 minutes of some of the band's best work without an ounce of filler, easily the most grand album in scope of the year so far. Next up is Aeviterne with the Ailing Facade. This is a death metal project that was recommended to me by fans in the comments and is the perfect example of how this community is a two-way street when it comes to awesome and often overlooked new music. I was already sold at the top with the viciousness of the vocals, but add Artificial Brain and Fallen Limbs guitarist Samuel Smith and some truly thunderous drumming engineered and mastered by Colin Marston of Gorguts, Krallis, and Behold the Arctopus, and I was hooked for the long haul. The band lists both the technicality of Immolation and psychedelic menace of Godflesh as influences, the latter especially coming through on the syncopation and eerie atmosphere of tracks like The Gaunt Sky and Stilled the Hollow Sway. The entire album is this perfect balance of battering brutality and haunting atmosphere, bloodthirsty yet beguiling, savage and deeply sinister. Right down to the cover art, it's like a nightmare brought to life. Then we have Author and Punisher with Krüller. Author and Punisher continues to be one of the most innovative industrial metal acts in the entire genre. Soul musician Tristan Schoen not only writes all the music, he also fabricates the machines he uses to create it.
Don't be a show-off.
The result is something both familiar in its components, but highly unique in its execution, and Tristan only continues to flex his creativity with Krüller. Every one of his albums has had something a little bit different to offer, but this is probably his most melodic to date. All of the usual aggressive pulsations are now offset by lots of sparkling, shimmering synths I can only describe as like tears in the rain. Almost as massive in its melancholy as the Blade Runner soundtrack, and I suppose that's fitting for music more or less crafted by a real-life cyberpunk cyborg. Next is Fit for an Autopsy with Oh What the Future Holds. Far from heaven. Now, I've never been a big Fit for an Autopsy fan over the years, but they absolutely knocked it out of the park here with their best and most diverse album to date. You've got serious bangers like Far From Heaven, Pandora, and In Shadows, but also some surprises that genuinely caught me off guard like Two Towers, which is like Gojira's From Mars to Sirius meets Deftones. All of this backed by powerful performances that are easily some of the best in their career in terms of technicality, but never losing track of the catchy hooks that keep the listener engaged. Not to mention it's also extremely well paced from start to finish, drawing connections along the way to everything from Rivers of Nile to Meshuggah. Then we have Greyhaven with This Bright and Beautiful World. This is a very special entry into Greyhaven's discography, perfectly folding new influences into their heavy roots for a record that feels entirely fresh and unique, and one that I could not stop listening to. There's total rippers like Foreign Anchor, softer rock moments like Candy, and then seriously catchy stuff somewhere in between like A Painful and Necessary Action, which for the life of me with that chorus, I cannot understand who decided not to make this a single. The songwriting had me thinking about everything from These Arms Are Snakes and later Poison the Well to Every Time I Die and Greg Puciato. Honestly, with all the emotional and stylistic ups and downs they cover on this album, I can scarcely believe it's only 34 minutes long, and all of it captured perfectly on the production side by the always talented Will Putney, who has put out quite a few slappers this year. Fantastic stuff. Back on the death metal front, we have Allegaeon with Damnum. If you're looking for one of the best progressive death metal albums of the year, look no further. Allegaeon continue to prove their worth with incredibly technical performances, but while also greatly expanding their repertoire of sound, with little detours into other styles like the Spanish guitar section of To Carry My Grief Through Torpor and Silence, some absolutely stunning piano on Blight, and Called Home feels like a straight-up love letter to Opeth. I'm also loving the clean vocals, which sound better than ever, and even the death growls, which I previously called one note in comparison to the complex instrumentation, sound like they're taking some more dynamic strides as well, with the almost Archspire sounding ones on the Dopamine Void. Even at over an hour, not a second is wasted. Keeping things technical but flipping the script again, we have Without Waves and Comedian. This Chicago band defies concise genre labeling, traversing a wide variety of influences that include the Dillinger Escape Plan, Gojira, Devin Townsend, and the Porcupine Tree. Opening track Good Grief alone runs quite the stylistic gauntlet over its relatively brief runtime, with Mike Patton vocals, chaotic fusions of prog and mathcore riffs, blackened tremolos against pop-influenced singing, electronic effects, and a big chunky outro. I love albums where every song has something a little bit different to offer, and Comedian definitely delivers in that department, with both ragers like Algorithm and more progressive, expansive content like Set and Setting, or the vaguely Opethy Do What Scares You and Slight and Shadows. Sleep Deep even sounds like a weird cross between, again, Deftones and Tears for Fears. At Metal Trenches, we're all about shedding light on the best and brightest acts out there, so please don't overlook this underground gem, and also let me know in the comments, as always, what is your favorite metal album so far in 2022? The more underground, the better. But moving along, we have Voivod with Synchro Anarchy. Another band I've never been a hardcore listener of, but I'm so glad I finally took the dive, because after many listens and also exploring their entire discography for the tier list, I feel confident in saying that this is one of the band's best albums, even going toe-to-toe with classics like Nothing Face and Dimension Hatros. Tracks like Paranormalium, Synchro Anarchy, and Planet Eaters in particular really showcase their best progressive qualities with seemingly endless riffs and often unpredictable transitions. The highly technical drumming and guitar work are in top form, and once more Rocky frequently steals the show on the bass. I really wasn't expecting much from this at all going in, but it quickly became one of my most listened albums of that month, so whether you're a longtime fan or a complete newcomer, I think there's plenty to enjoy with this one. Better late than never. Likewise, Napalm Death also continue to put out their best material in Resentment Is Always Seismic, a final throw of Throes. Especially in the world of grindcore, it's amazing to not only get albums as wild and experimental as this, but to also have it come from one of the bands responsible for establishing the basic blueprint to begin with. That's insane. If you love Throes of Joy in the Jaws of Defeatism, you are going to love this follow-up for all the same reasons. Even the covers are fantastic, like their absolutely demented take on Slab's People Pie. A lot of people seem to be treating this as a throwaway EP given the lack of recognition I was seeing when it came out, but I assure you this is a critical listening experience for both fans and non-fans alike. It's got straight grinders like Narcissus, the hypnotic and haunting atmosphere of the Resentment tracks, and even a Bad Brains cover. Easily one of the most unique things you'll hear in 2022. And then these are in no particular order, but I had to end with Ghost and Impera. Y'all, I never thought I would be the one to put a Ghost album in my top 10 anything, but here we are with it easily stomping even some of the heaviest shit I've heard this year.
Surprise, motherfucker!
The amount of variety on display here is phenomenal, and all while still providing hit after hit with both catchy choruses and some of their heaviest moments to date.
It's a hunter's moon.
Ghosts touch on so many classic influences with this record, from Rush and Van Halen to Faith No More and Danny Elfman. It's like a tour of all the music I grew up with in the 80s and 90s on the radio and through television, and all somehow within a focused, perfectly honed concept without an ounce of filler. I know some fans seem to either love or hate this album, but I just cannot stop listening to it. I may love black and death metal, but I also can't say no to some really well-written pop rock. But y'all check out this playlist for more of my monthly roundups of favorite metal albums from 2022, or this playlist for some tier list for some of the albums and bands that I've mentioned in this list. And again, let me know down in the comments what's your favorite metal album of 2022 so far. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.